So, ma'am, thanks for joining us today on Leadership Log, which is a podcast for the Air Force Lifecycle Management Center community on topics of interest. And the topic of interest today is learning about the C-17. And so, ma'am, if you could introduce yourself and give us a little bit of your career background.
Yeah, sure. So thanks for having me. I'm excited to finally get to do this. So my name is Amanda Okeson. I'm the current sitting Senior Material Leader of the C-17 System Program Manager. So in charge of all aspects of the program office for the C-17 weapon system. My background's a little unique, just like every SML. We all come up a different path on the way there. So I started out as an engineer, spent some time in the space career field as well as intelligence career fields. I didn't really get into the aircraft business till I was a major, and then started out in MQ-9 and RQ-4. Spent some time in the headquarters. That's where we met the first time, was in the headquarters, and then had the opportunity to come down here to Robins to be the C-17 SML. Been in just under 20 years, so pretty amazing time so far. C-17 is awesome, and I'm excited here to tell you about it today.
And we would probably be remiss to not mention that while you were working with General McMurray when he was commander, that you came up with the name Leadership Log. And so the reason this podcast is named the way it is thanks to you. So thank you very much. We're approaching, we've just posted our 90th episode recently. And so, so we're chugging along, trying to get the most use out of the name as we can.
No, it's awesome. We started in COVID, right? Didn't quite know what we were going to put together. And it's amazing how it's transformed 2.5 years later. So it's awesome. I love it.
Yeah, that's right. General McMurray said, hey, why don't we do a podcast? And so we just said, okay, all right, fine, we'll do one. Mm-hmm. So let's start talking about the C-17. And I think you got to start with its most recent performance in Afghanistan during the evacuation there. Really put the aircraft's capabilities to the test, and it in all accounts passed with flying colors. Explain to us how that kind of went down.
No, you're right. I mean, when you think back about the last few weeks in August and just the turmoil that all happened in a very short period of time, the C-17 was kind of in the foundation for that entire operation. So Operation Allies Refuge, the largest non-combatant evacuation operation, airlift version of that in U.S. history. In a matter of days, we went from just normal standard ops to over 80 C-17s deployed, 4 deployed into theater. A huge amount of the lift was done with C-17 operations. Obviously, and if you look at the news, you saw C-17s at the forefront and massive passenger evacuations, over 800 on one aircraft. The images when the aircraft or when the airport was kind of overrun and the C-17s were at the heart of trying to evacuate individuals, really the aircraft did incredible. It did exactly what it's supposed to do. It was reliable, it was available. The entire enterprise worked together to make sure we had parts, pieces, waivers, engineering dispositions, everything in place to make sure that aircraft could be used as it needed to be used. When you look at the statistics, the C-17 was the foundation for the entire effort. Of the 124,000 evacuated, over 79,000 were done on C-17s. So just to get you a feel for how much the C-17 was involved in it. The other piece to it that we can't talk about, we care a lot about here, is that it wasn't just U.S. C-17s. One of my favorite pictures was actually on the BBC. In the middle of the operation, the BBC was talking a lot about the C-17 and its capabilities. And there's a picture on there that had 3 tails on the ramp in Afghanistan, and they were all different partners. So there was a U.S. tail, a NATO tail, and I believe a UK tail on there as well. So really incredible when you think about it, that it wasn't just a U.S. Effort, it was a coalition effort, and all of the C-17s contributed and performed exceptionally well in that operation.
So let's talk a little bit about the development of the C-17. I mean, we've seen how it performed for the mission that it was really designed to do. But at the time it was developed, the Air Force was still flying C-130s, we still are, C-141s and C-5s. So was the C-17 originally seen as like a replacement for the C-141 or?
Yeah, so this was fun. So I had to do some history deep diving here. Obviously, I was not here when the C-141 was in play, but and we have a board that was in the program office at Wright-Patterson that has the entire history of C-17. And it's down here at Robins now, it's up on the wall. So I walked through the board this morning, kind of looking through the history. And you're right, it was definitely at the time, the C-141s were aging. The C-130s, they were also getting a little older. And they have a very niche role with their mission and tactical kind of mission set. And the C-5s are on that opposite end, right? A huge aircraft with massive oversized cargo capability. So trying to find an aircraft that could replace the 141 and kind of fit in that medium niche, right? Where it still be strategic and also accomplish some tactical missions as well. It was fun as I went look at this, and there's likely some people at Wright Pat who were there, closer to the beginning of C-17 that works in the program office. I know a few people that when I look at the board, I chuckle. There's some names on there: General Wolfenbarger, General Johnson, that were program leads for C-17 back in the day. But the history is quite interesting. Like many acquisition programs, it had some fits and starts. It started in the 70s, so it actually has roots in the 1970s with some prototyping and testing efforts. In the 80s is when you really get to the CX program, and I think in 1981 is when it actually got the C-17 name and the designation in the early 80s. Just like all aircraft development programs, it went through a lot of challenges. It had budget delays and schedule delays and requirements challenges. Its testing didn't go quite as planned. Lots of fits and starts with deciding exactly what our path was going to be forward on the platform. In about the early 90s, got its first flight. I think it was September of 1991. The C-17 took its first flight. And around that time, kind of got the DoD direction that said, if you can't figure out how to make it cost effective, we won't buy anymore. We're at that point and trying to figure out how to move forward. The enterprise, and this is where I think the uniqueness of C-17 comes into play. The enterprise all worked together in that. The program office, DCMA, Boeing, with McDonnell Douglas back in the day as well. That enterprise pushed the platform to be successful. It worked together to overcome those challenges, to figure out new and creative ways to do production and supply chain. And all of that led to the platform that we have today. Obviously, when you look back at history, it was a little tough start. But wow, I mean, when you look at Afghanistan and the way it performs today, an incredible platform that just had to get over some of those hurdles on the way through.
So what are some of the unique capabilities that it brought to the fight? So you talk about getting that middle niche role.
Yeah, so C-17 is really flexible. That's, when you look at the mission set, you can do that strategic airlift, that long, passenger cargo kind of mission. It's also aeromedical. It's also used for short takeoff and landings. That's one of the really unique things about C-17. I wrote it down so I wouldn't forget the exact numbers here because I think it's pretty amazing. When it comes to landing, the C-17 has the ability to operate in small, austere airfields. That was one of the unique requirements that was levied on it, similar to a C-130. Right? The C-17 can land in runways as short as 3,500 feet and only 90 feet wide. So when you look at that as a runway, it's really small. And for an aircraft of that size, it also has the ability to back up. It has thrust reversers, if I can speak English, that allow it to go forward, backwards, make a 3-point turn on a runway to be able to take off in a different direction if needed. So that flexibility is really the uniqueness that came with C-17, right? It was commercially developed. A lot of commercial technology went into it. So from a maintenance perspective, a lot easier to maintain. And then it really just can be adapted as needed for the missions it needs to support.
So right now, I think the Air Force has just over 200, and there's even more. You mentioned flown by international partners. Are there plans to build more C-17s, or is there another cargo plane that's on the horizon?
Yeah, so there are 275 total C-17s in active operation today. You're right, about 222 are U.S., actually 222 are U.S., and 53 are flown by our foreign material sales partners. We actually have 8 FMS partners across the enterprise. No plans to build any more C-17s, but I'll tell you several of our FMS partners would love to have another one in their inventory, but no plans at this time. With regards to the next generation, the next CX, I'll leave that answer to AMC. Obviously, as they look ahead at the enterprise, at some point you're going to have to look at the ages of all the aircraft that are in the mix. But I'll tell you, the C-17 right now can last for quite some time. I expect it's going to be in the inventory for many more years. There's a lot of legs left on this platform. It has a lot of structural integrity and things moving forward to be able to support its life. So whether or not we go to a CX, that'll be AMC's call, but definitely believe the C-17 is going to be around for quite some time.
So what are some of the things that you've got working on the C-17 right now to keep it kind of modernized, keep it up with the times?
Okay, so C-17, like you said, it's actually, we're 30 years old. So people think of C-17 and they think of it as the young aircraft. But when you talk about a 1991 flight, it's now 31 years old. So it's starting to hit the challenge point of it's got some obsolescence that we have to handle. It's got some mechanical systems that need updated and things of that nature. So a heavy focus of what we're doing right now is obsolescence efforts, replacing parts and pieces and just kind of extending the life going forward. We also have a ton of efforts on the communications updates. When you look at AMC's priorities and the near peer fight that we could have to participate in, really making sure that the C-17 is up for communications capabilities. So updating the online and site antennas, all of our SATCOM antennas, looking at information in the cockpit and trying to update the cockpit. The cockpit is actually a huge part of our next generation of mods. We're working through a flight deck replacement right now to address some of the obsolescence that's out in the queue. So a lot of activities on that side, communications and obsolescence. We also have a few unique things that I think are pretty fun to talk about. The C-17 is one of the largest consumers of gas in the Air Force. And so looking at things for drag reduction and fuel initiatives, trying to figure out if we go down the path of reducing the amount of fuel we need to carry, and looking at that. Also looking at computer-based maintenance and how we implement that on a C-17. There's a lot of data that's actually in our aircraft, and being able to take that data and do some of those data analytics and really drive to some predictive maintenance and going down that path. So really excited about the future. It's kind of that transition point for us. You know, the aircraft are no longer in production, and we're now at that modernization point, trying to drive the future of what it needs to look like to be relevant for our fights.
Mm-hmm. So how is the aircraft sustainment wise? I mean, I'm sure it comes back into the depot occasionally, but how is it to maintain even in the field?
Yeah, so the C-17, this is where I think C-17 is the most unique and the most phenomenal, is how we sustain it. So the C-17 is actually, it's a contractor logistics supported contract. We work with Boeing as the prime contractor. We've been in a performance-based logistics contract with Boeing for well over 20 years, I think, if I look at the date. So it's been quite some time. So that PBL arrangement with Boeing is a way to drive that performance through services, right? We're looking at what performance we want the aircraft to achieve versus what parts we need to buy. So in general, our relationship with Boeing is very, very integral and integrated into how we sustain the C-17. The other thing we do differently on the C-17 is we manage as what we call the virtual fleet. And this is one that I think is truly exceptional. I had no idea it existed until I got to C-17. And what it is we manage 275 total tails, not US and individual FMS partners. So the team, every member of the C-17 community actually buys into the sustainment contract. We share material, we share labor, we share those costs, and they're allocated across the entire enterprise. It really drives a cost efficiency for our partners. It allows them to not have to buy a whole host of spare engines just for their fleet. They can share in the pool of engines across the board. And it really is an incredible model for how to integrate with your FMS partners and really drive some savings across the board. The other piece we do, you talked about depot. So we do, obviously we come into depot from an aircraft perspective. We have two. All of our depot activities are done through Boeing. So Boeing has a depot in San Antonio. That's where a good chunk of our FMS partners go, as well as some of our US partners. And then we have a public-private partnership with the Warner Robins ALC here in Warner Robins. And so a chunk of our aircraft actually come through the depot here in Warner Robins with Boeing and with the depot as they support their maintenance actions. We don't do a traditional, this is where C-17 is unique, and we tried to carve the box a little different, right? Every platform's not the same, so how does C-17 need to be maintained? We don't do a PDM, a traditional PDM. We do heavy maintenance. So it adds a different dynamic that allows our maintenance cycles to be a little faster. That allows us to keep the aircraft available and ready in the field. And so it's a pretty unique construct for the C-17.
What about additive manufacturing? So there's been a lot of development, manufacturing aircraft parts. I know Tinker just opened a facility to do additive manufacturing for engine parts. How is that working with C-17?
So we're working on it, is what I would say. We're getting into that space, not fully in yet. There are some areas where we've actually got pieces and parts in our maintenance activities. We have a ton of additive manufacturing parts, right? Maintenance guides, maintenance tools, things of that nature. The aircraft is where we're working to kind of step into it now. So we've got vents. Actually, this week, I think, or next week, they're going out to be fit checked. We're going to additive manufacture the vents to replace several of the ducts that we have in the aircraft that need replaced that are obsolete. That drag reduction initiative I talked about earlier, one of the efforts is actually microvanes. They go on the back of the aircraft and kind of adjust the airflow. We're going to 3D print, additive manufacture those pieces as well. and have those attached to the aircraft to reduce some of the drag on the aircraft. So I think there's a lot of places where we can use additive. We just haven't quite, put it across the entire enterprise yet. So we're getting our first few pieces moving now, and I'm hopeful that this will kind of get the crank rolling, and we can get out there and get a few more activities in that.
And you mentioned predictive maintenance. So I know that's a new thing that's coming along as well. So like analyzing the data so that you can anticipate when something's going to break and fix it before it does. How is that working out with C-17?
Yeah, so for C-17, we've got about 2 efforts that are going on predictive maintenance. So the first one is the traditional kind of conditions-based maintenance plus activities, looking through data and trying to do part by part analysis of when you should replace it based on reliability, maintainability, et cetera. And so we're working on that path. Just a few activities that we've started down there. I think the big piece where we have a play in this is data analytics. So the C-17 actually has a data bus recorder. It has a data bus system, I should say, and we're looking at the options to institute a data bus recording system in the aircraft to be able to pull all that data off of the 1553 buses and all of the other recorders that we have on aircraft. Take that data, analyze it, and see how we can apply it to C-17 maintenance. I'll tell you, our FMS partners are ahead of us on this one. So our FMS partners have input a box called the Centralized Maintenance Computer. It does this, and they work with Boeing to analyze the data and look ahead at areas where, hey, we're going to be in HSC or home station check, and we have fuel probes that are starting to go bad. Well, when we empty the tanks, we should replace the probes, right? Do it all at once versus wait 3 or 4 weeks later and then find out the probe failed, and now you've got fuel and you've got to go through that whole effort. So our FMS partners are actually implementing this technology now and really drive into some of those activities. For the US side of the house, we have a demo ongoing at the moment at McGuire with this capability, trying to understand how we would implement it on the US side and what that does when you have a much larger fleet. And then we're working with AMC and the RSO to partner and figure out what the best path is going forward for the C-17 on the data analytics side. So a lot of promise here. We're on the cusp of being able to implement it across the platform. I'm really excited to see what it can provide. A lot of opportunity to just plan your maintenance. It's amazing what you can do if you can just plan it out and know it's coming versus that unscheduled maintenance that drives delays when you're not ready for them.
Well, as they say, the old adage is the greatest ability is availability. So, yeah. So anything that helps that is a good thing for the warfighter.
Exactly.
So, ma'am, that pretty much brings us to the end of our questions. Is there anything that I forgot to ask you about, or anything that you'd like to add or reiterate?
Yeah, so I want to reiterate one thing here, and one is, the mission of C-17 is incredible. To me, this was one of the things that, as I got here, I've worked a lot of Intel platforms in my background, and coming here, you can see this mission every day, right? It's so easy to connect yourself to the mission. When you look at the C-17, obviously we talked about Operation Allies Refuge, but if you just look back in the last 6 months, you had Operation Allies Refuge last year. We had baby formula transported on a C-17 from Germany to the United States when we had shortages for baby formula. You had parts, pieces, and weapons moving into NATO in support of the Ukraine and the NATO allies. And then just yesterday, Her Majesty the Queen's was moved from Edinburgh to London via C-17. So when you look at the flexibility and the mission of this platform, boy, it's incredible. But the only reason it's incredible is because of the people. And I talked about that a little bit as we answered the questions, but what makes C-17 different is Team Globemaster, is what we call it here. So Team Globemaster is not just the program office or Boeing or AMC or the operators. It's really an integrated partnership that's unlike any program I've been on before. From each of the program offices, you've got engines and simulators and commodities to us, to Boeing and all their subcontractors, to AMC, all the MAGCOMs, to every individual, every supply chain management, every depot. All those pieces really worked together in a way that is just phenomenal. Each person brings that to the table. Each person pushes the machine forward and ensures that that aircraft, like you said earlier, that it's available when it needs to be available, that it can fly when our nations need it to fly, and that it's ready to execute the mission, whatever that mission may be. And it's really all about Team Globemaster here in C-17. So it's an honor here for me to be here in C-17 to be able to lead this team. I've really loved getting to learn this platform and know the mission and the people that execute it. And it's really just an incredible experience here.
Well, ma'am, thanks for joining us today on Leadership Log and helping us gain a greater understanding and appreciation for the C-17.
Awesome. Well, thanks for having me. I will be happy to come back again and talk about C-17 anytime. So
Absolutely. Good. Thank you.
all right. Thank you.